LMD Magazine and EFM present Biz Talk, taking an in-depth look at today's biz landscape.
Welcome to another edition of LMD EFM Biz Talk. We caught up with the Deputy Head of Trade and Politics of the European Union, Roshan, Lyman, the Chairperson of Women in Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka, Gayani, Alwis, and the Director of SAMARA Consulting, Sabine, Samarawickrema, ahead of the fourth session of Jci Bizmeet, which focused on building an ethical and sustainable supply chain. We'll begin with you, Mr. Lyman. What areas will you be covering?
Today, the main topic of this event is ethical and sustainable supply chains. And I'm going to talk from a European perspective because the European consumer is very demanding when it comes to ethical supply chains, especially. They just don't purchase a product, but they want to also know what kind of practices or what kind of processing that took place, whether ethical practices were followed, such as human rights and so on. So my discussion is on that, how EU looks at sourcing, and at the same time talk about the various mechanisms that we have to ensure that those countries or those suppliers supplying to the European market have to how they can comply with our requirements and export to the European Union.
What kinds of measures has the EU taken in this regard?
We have various instruments. I mean, we have our own regulations. We also follow, let's say, international standards. We try to, we encourage suppliers to comply with international standards. In some cases, with our own regulations. Other cases with international law. So we also have certain instruments to promote ethical, let's say, supply chains, and the GSP Plus, which is a very known subject in Sri Lanka, exactly does that, because it gives access to the European market to local manufacturers who comply, or the country that complies with international conventions such as human rights, labor rights, good governance practices, and that respect environmental laws. So this is actually a summary. This regulation is a summary of everything that we want to do under ethical sourcing.
What can you tell us about the tools at the EU's disposal that allow countries to move towards ethical supply chains, and the measures that Sri Lanka can take to comply with these standards?
Yeah. So Sri Lankan companies who are exporting to the EU right now are fully aware of the requirements of their sectors. Each sector has its own, requirements, and our regulations are published in one of our websites, in our EU delegation website, and it's very easy. You just plug in your HS code of your product, and it'll give you a list of regulations by which that you need to comply with for you to export to the European market. So that is one instrument. Then we also, over the years, have been providing technical assistance through our funding to various sectors. We have assisted the tourism sector, the garment sector, the gems and jewelry sector, the agricultural sector, and so on. So at each of these kinds of interventions where with our funding we provide technical assistance, we also help companies to comply with or get ready to comply with our requirements so that they could expand their market to the European Union.
Moving on to you, Mrs. Alwis, what will you be focusing on?
The topic that is assigned to me is to talk about how sustainable and ethical supply chain is going to help businesses to grow and achieve competitive advantage. So I'll be talking about the best practices that can be adopted in Sri Lanka from global companies. Gone are the days that companies can only focus on profits. Profits while making your businesses ethical and sustainable are now mutually inclusive things. So you need to really look at all three aspects together, because we are impacted by our actions are impacted by the environment and the people around us. So whatever the actions that we make through our activities that we do in our companies, that will have a huge bearing on the society that we live in. So if we all as companies act as responsible corporate citizens and do our businesses in an ethical manner, and our code of conduct really demonstrate that, the society will really embrace our products and services, and we will really achieve competitive advantage.
If you can elaborate a little bit more.
You want more?
Yes.
So basically, how can companies achieve ethical supply chains? First of all, you must understand what your supply chain is. From the time you wake up in the morning until you go to bed, all the activities or the experiences, the things that you consume are because of a supply chain, right? So if you don't have a supply chain, there is no life, I would say, right? So do you really know, whenever you buy a t-shirt or when you buy some food item, do you know how it is being manufactured? Under what conditions those are being manufactured? Are the workers who are manufacturing those products, are they being treated very well, fairly? Are they getting a decent wage? Do they have the right environmental conditions in their workplace? Are we really concerned about these conditions in the world we live in? These are the questions as consumers we must put pressure on our organizations. When we as society may put pressure on the organizations, automatically those organizations will have to align and act as responsible citizens. Now, new companies who are entering the market now have realized the importance of this, and now they are really aligning to this new way of working. However, the old companies are also realizing, because of societal pressures, that they also need to really align and then achieve competitive advantage. So all companies must realize we cannot only look at the profits, we need to look at environmental stewardship, social sustainability. We must also look at, in addition to look at economic viability. So it's a triple bottom line approach that we need to really look at as a company, not purely the profit. So while doing well, you can do good. So little actions that you do in your own company can make a big difference, because if you can demonstrate to the society that you live in that you act responsibly and you make money from the ventures that you are responsible for, the society will really respond to you by buying your products, because they know that the products that they consume will be coming from a responsible source, and the company that they are producing these products are responsible citizens and responsible organizations, and you will be rewarded from that. So therefore you can do well by doing good.
Mrs. Samarawickrema, what will you be focusing on at Bizmeet?
I'm going to talk about the role of consumers in sustainable supply chains. And basically what I would like to stress is that currently our focus is on how to please the consumer, like how to make sure that the consumer believes what the company is doing, rather than looking at the core activities of a company itself. And the main point I really want to highlight is that when having a sustainable business and looking at the sustainable supply chain, including it in an ethical way, there is no point of spending any PR on convincing the consumer to believe it, because naturally it is already sustainable.
What do consumers get from supporting ethical supply chains?
So basically, with consumers, it's like this. There's a small share of consumers who really would go out of their way to reward ethical businesses, like either financially or also by only buying their products and things like this, or they would pay a higher price for it. But the majority of consumers won't. So they still go for convenience, they still go for the cheaper product and the fashion. So there are a lot of different factors which are influencing the consumer. So rather, the benefits for the consumers are that they don't need to feel bad when they are buying products, right? I mean, right now, reading in the newspapers about corporate conduct, there are a lot of consumers who actually feel trapped within their consumer choices. So they can either pay for a very expensive product, which is ethically sustainable, it's more like advertised as a fashion in the European countries at least, or they go for the very cheap product, but then they know it has been produced in some countries where different ethical conduct has not been implemented in the right way, right? So that's why they get the benefit that they have a free choice, right? They can buy something which makes them feel good, and in that way they can support the company. But it should not be the focus of convincing the consumer. It should be automatically the company should focus on it, because then they don't need to convince anyone.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday for more insights from our business community. You can also log on to efm.lk and lmd.lk/lmdtv for a visual experience of Biz Talk.